Okay, good evening, everyone. Just checking, Mrs. Schofield, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Perfect. A warm welcome to you all. Thanks for coming along this Wednesday evening, the 10th of March, or you may be watching on catch up because we will record this and put it onto our website in due course. This is our parent information evening for Year 11 and 13 parents, but I know there will be many students in the audience as well, where we're going to talk to you about Year 11 and Year 13 examinations and assessments. Joining me this evening, I'm Mr Ballantyne, the assistant head, one of the assistant heads. Joining me will be in the green room, Mr Sizer, deputy head, responsible for Key Stage 4, and Mrs Schofield, head of sixth form. And waiting in the wings as well, we will also have Mr Fry looking in to provide some technical support, and Mrs Browning as well, who is going to be assisting this evening. Let me tell you a little bit about how it's going to work tonight, the format of the evening, before I pass over to Mr Sizer. You'll see up in the top right there is a Q&A, if you're looking on PC, a Q&A tool. Please ask any questions that you have as we go through the evening. Hopefully we'll be able to answer everything in the short presentation that we do, but if you have, we'll have a quick Q&A session following the presentation where I hope we get through everything. There's quite a bit of common ground between Year 11 and 13 in the assessments, and then there'll be some specific information about Year 11 and then some specific information about Year 13. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Mr Sizer. Hold on a second, Mr Sizer, while I cue you. Good evening.
Hello everyone. It's good to see you. I mean, I can't see you, but here I am. You can't see me yet, but when you do see me, there you go, you can see me now. So lockdown I have not fared well under lockdown. I've got a lockdown haircut and a lockdown beard, but I am still here and I'm still alive and still working hard for the students. So as Mr Ballantyne says, we're going to give you very quick, I mean, have I ever done anything quickly? Of course, there is that, but we're going to try and give a very quick overview of what our plans are for the next 10 weeks to May half term, which is on the 28th of May, and we'll talk about some of the key dates and we'll talk about some of the key principles that we're going to put in place. The most important thing, really, is that we are fair and transparent for all the students. Okay, that's the thing we're really aiming for. So if we can go to the first slide, Mr Ballantyne, we're going to run through some of the key issues. So as you probably know, there will be no external exams. The Prime Minister made that announcement back in January, and therefore no external exams. But we've decided, and we think this is absolutely right, that there won't be. We're not going to do any internal exams either. So the students are going to be judged on their work in class, and obviously how they work at home as well in preparation for that working class. So as a consequence, one of the first consequences of that is there's no need for large scale revision. We're not intending to run any revision sessions. We say that there may be one or two here and there shouldn't be anything happening after school for the students. But again, for Year 11, we do have plans for some students to be able to stay behind after school. When we say there's no assessments after school, it may well be that there'll be some PE practical work that needs to be done after school, so it doesn't impact on other lessons. There may well be some food work that's done after school. There may well be some technology and some art work that's done after school, so that they can spend longer periods of time than the 50-minute lessons, but not interact and not affect anybody else. But we're not intending for there to be any revision sessions like there would normally be. So the overall plan is that each student will build up a portfolio of evidence, and they will have continual mini assessments in each subject. Now these mini assessments may be every 10 days, every 2 weeks. So there's a plan. We'll show you some draft plans that we have in just a few moments. But the idea of these is that they will be possibly exam questions. There'll be exam style questions that are worth certain grades and worth certain marks, which will then equate to grades, and the students will use these assessments to give to provide evidence to show that they can meet certain standards. And that's what they're going to do. And all of that evidence will be put into a portfolio where the students will then have that portfolio, and the teachers will use that portfolio to judge the grades that students should be working at. Now, of course, you're hearing, well, this is going to be all the time, continual work. Yeah, but actually, if they'd had GCSE or A-level exams in the end of May and into June, they would be doing basically assessments every 10 days to 2 weeks anyway, possibly even more frequently than that, because they would have done past paper after past paper after past paper and practice questions all the time. This is really a formalisation of that. We will share with you when they are going to be. So departments at the moment are building plans of what the assessments are going to be, what they're going to be on, when they're going to be, and we will share that information with you. What I'm going to do is, as I get them from each department, I'm going to collate them for year 11, and I suspect that Mrs Schofield and Mr Ballantyne will probably collate them for year 13 as well, so they can be shared out. When they do the assessments, they will get feedback. So we've had a question that's come up already. Will there be continuous feedback from the mini assessments? Yes, there will be continuous feedback. Students will know how well they've done, and they will know what they need to do to improve, so that then if they do the next assessment, 10 days, 2 weeks, whenever it is later, they'll be in a position to know what they need to do to improve to make the next assessment better still. So the idea is that they will improve as they go along over the next 10 weeks and demonstrate the skills. And over the course of the next couple of months or so, the assessments that they'll do in class, and they're not big, like I said, they're not big assessments. Some of them may last 10 minutes, some of them may last 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. But the idea is they'll last within a time scale in the class. Sometimes they may overrun. There are students who get extra time in assessments, and we'll make sure that they get the extra time, so they may well overrun a little bit longer, or we may ask students to come back at lunchtime just to do the last 5 or 10 minutes, but we will include that. So the students will get evidence, they'll get them back, they will know what is in their portfolio. We can assume that other things can go in the portfolio. So, for example, mock results, mocks could go in the portfolio. Now, from a year 13 perspective, the mocks are very valuable, potentially, because they were done quite recently. The year 11 mocks were done back in November, and that's a bit further away. We'd expect students to improve. So actually, we're not going to put the mock results in if they're not brilliant. If they're not a fair reflection of what we think you can do, we won't include mocks as part of the evidence. But if they are good and they are a fair reflection of what you can do, then we will include the mocks as evidence. We will include other assessments that have been done previously. We may well include exercise, work in exercise books. So I think there's a fair assumption here that you could pretty much any work that's being done as we speak in lessons from now on could well be used as evidence to demonstrate the depth of knowledge, the depth of understanding, the skills that are needed, so that we can cover as many of the assessment objectives that the students need to cover, which they would have to cover if they were doing exams. But of course, they're not doing exams. Non-examined assessments, what in layman's terms are basically what are now called coursework. So there are subjects where they're doing coursework. In most A levels, there's coursework, and in some GCSEs, there is coursework. But we are expecting those to be finished. So we would like to think, where possible, the coursework will be finished, because there tend to be a fairly sizable amount of assessment in the coursework, and so consequently we would use it, and it would probably have quite a lot of weight as to the final grade. So we're going to work on making sure we finish coursework. We've had a couple of questions that's linked to this, which I'll kind of go through now. If a student gets COVID and misses assessments, how will this be handled? In much the same way that if somebody was ill leading up to an exam, we will, or they had a serious incident that happened leading up to exams, special consideration will be taken into account. We would potentially allow people to do work at home. We would, under supervised conditions at home, we would not include if they were off for a week or 10 days because they were self-isolating. They'd be able to do their work at home, and we wouldn't penalise them in any way. We're not setting out to penalise anybody. actually the exact opposite of that is true. What we're trying to do is to make sure that every single student in years 11 and year 13 have the opportunity to demonstrate what they can do well, and therefore get the highest grade they want. Because as we've said, I mean, I've said certainly to year 11 parents who are here, and probably the year 13 parents a few years ago when they were in year 10 and in year 11, what we want is for the students to do the best they can do. That's in our interests, that's in the students' interests, that's in obviously parents' interests. Another question here talks about, will subjects work together to timetable assessments? It's not possible in year 11 because there's so many different lessons on all the time. But and we did think about plotting it and planning it, but actually the idea is that all of the work may count. Every single piece of work that they do may well count. So consequently, you can't really timetable that you've got one on and then another one on, and then you have a couple of days, and then you've got another one on. Actually, what students can do is they can manage it. They're used to managing doing assessments kind of all the time, and they're not big assessments. They're fairly, we use this phrase low stakes assessment, where we say that assessments, it's not really important. And if you think about it, yes, they're all really important, but they are also only make up a tiny little fraction of the overall picture that we're going to get. It's a holistic picture. We're not going to say you've done 6 or 7 assessments in the last 10 weeks and we're going to add them all up and you're going to get a score. That's not really how it's going to work. We're going to get grade descriptors from the exam boards, and those grade descriptors will give us a sense of what is the work looking like. Where is the evidence that they can do work at a certain level? Can they work at a grade 7? Can they work at a grade 5? And that's where the work comes, rather than adding it all up and then getting a score. We're getting some questions up. I think I've already answered some of these, but I'll happily go back over them. Will extra time agreed for SEN as would have been provided for exams for the assessment? Yes. They will get extra time, but they may not get extra time in the lesson. If the assessment lasts 40 minutes, they will they may get an extra 10 minutes on the end of that. If they get 25%, that will take them up to 50 minutes, which is the whole lesson, of course. And it says here, what weighting will previous mock or test results carry within the portfolio? Will students be informed as to subjects will differ? Transparency key to reassure students. You're absolutely right. Transparency is the key. Every single student will know what's in their portfolio. Every single student will know what sort of level the work that they're in, the work that's in that portfolio is at, give or take. We can't say for absolute certain, but give or take what sort of standard the work is at within a range. They will know that. What weighting will previous mock or test results carry? I don't believe they'll carry any at all. They'll carry the weighting that we decide we want to give them. We're not here to catch people out or trick people into getting low grades. We want them to get the highest grades possible. We are waiting to hear from exam boards. So we will hear from exam boards, and they say before the end of the month. I think it's on the next slide, Mr. Ballantyne, if you want to flick onto the next slide. As you can see from the last bullet point on the slide, it says grade descriptors will be used to decide overall standard, and that's to be released this month. So it may well be that after Easter we have a better idea if the exam board say, right, you're going to weight this assessment objective, or you're going to give this much weight to the coursework, or you're going to give this much weight to a mock exam. I don't think they're going to give any weight to a mock exam because some schools haven't done mock exams. Some schools did mock exams in the midst of a COVID outbreak. We were lucky. We did our mocks in November for year 11, but of course year 13 did their mocks remotely using exam.net. So there are different circumstances there. So we will have to treat things differently, and but we're not interested in having absolutely clear-cut rules. We're going to be flexible, and we will change them, and we'll review the process as we go along, but we want to make sure the students have the best portfolio. So all the assessments will be marked by the teacher using school marking policy. As I've already said before, further assessments can build on using even better if. So you know about what went well and even better if, and my responses. They will then get a further assessment, and they can use that even better if to improve their overall grade. We have to send out the results. The last date for the results to be submitted, the grades to be submitted to the exam boards, is the 18th of June. So all portfolios will be moderated by other colleagues, and in some cases by other schools where we can work together to check that the standard is right, that there's a standardization, that it's fair and open. And then, as I said, grade descriptors will be given to us later in the month, so we'll be in a position to make judgments then. Okay, next slide, please, sir. Okay, I said before, this is an example perhaps of, well, not perhaps, it's definitely an example. This is an example of an assessment plan. I think this is media for year 13, so gives an idea of where the assessment points are. So on the week beginning the 8th of March, which is this week, the Vogue magazine assessment, which has already been done. Okay, and then the following week there'll be an assessment which is based on C2, section A, about television. I guess you just have to watch television for 50 minutes and say whether you think it's good or not. I don't know. Is it a bit trickier than that, Mr. Ballantyne? Can't be sure. But
well, yeah, the old jokes are the best, Mr. Tyson. Well done.
Okay, and the next slide is an example of an English GCSE GCSE assessment plan. So next week on the 15th of March there is a assessment point where the students are writing a language paper 2 section, a question 5 section, which is I think about 40 minutes. That's going to be 40 minutes in the class, I believe, and then 2 weeks later on the 29th of March, and it's going to take a couple of days, it's going to be a language paper 1 creative writing assessment, which is something, all these things they've done before, just sort of revisiting them. And in preparation for these, there'll be preparation in the class for these. There'll be homework that's set, certainly in year 11 and certainly in year 13 as well. There'll be homework that's set. And in order to prepare and revise for it, they'll be prepared in class. We're not going to take, no one's going into any of these assessments cold. All of the lessons, all of the learning that's taking place in lessons in year 11 and 13 now are geared towards preparing the students to do mini assessments as they go along. Okay, next slide please, sir. Okay, so some key dates for you, and then we can move on to some year 13 things from Mrs. Schofield. Some key dates. So as we've said, the 28th of May is the end of half term. It's very late this year, but the end of half term. And that is going to be the deadline for assessment. So for year 11 and year 13, that'll be the last day that any work that students do can be submitted into the portfolio. From then until the 18th of June will be moderation time for the teachers. And on the 18th of June is the last date for the submission to exam boards. There's going to be sixth form induction. Probably, I don't know whether Mr. Ballantyne wants to say anything about sixth form induction at the moment, sir.
Mrs. Schofield will cover that in the next slide.
Excellent. And then 2 key dates for your diary, which are new dates, so you need to have these penciled in. The 10th of August is A-level results day, and the 12th of August is GCSE results day. They're much earlier than usual. Now there are other questions, and some of the questions that have come up in the live chat are covering these. This is about leaving days. We don't know for sure yet. What we do definitely want to do, we're not intending that the 28th of May is the leaving date. So although that's the last day that they'll be submitting work for their portfolios, that won't be the leaving date, largely because we think by the 28th of May we still won't be in a position to hold assemblies and to hold events, but we think that by the time we get into June we will be able to. So there are other things that this I can talk about year 11 in detail, but there are other things that year 11s haven't been through. There are other rites of passage. They haven't done work experience. They haven't done a lot of careers work outside of their PSHE lessons. Their practice interviews, which the students do, which are really important to do, especially given that we haven't done work experience. We'd quite like to do the interviews, the practice interviews, and we think that actually we might be able to do the practice interviews, which is the day when the students come dressed up properly, smartly, as if they've got an interview, and we can prepare them for it in PSHE lessons leading up to the 28th of May. But we'd quite like to do that at some point after the half term, and maybe coincide that with a leaving day event where they can sign shirts and things like that, because at the moment they're not kind of allowed to gather together formally to do the shirt signing of each other and things like that, which we hope we can do. So we are intending to do that after the May half term and into sort of mid-June, either before the 18th of June or slightly after the 18th of June, depending on when restrictions are lifted and when we're allowed to do these things. The prom, I can't speak for the sixth form prom, but the year 11 prom is booked. And it is booked, I've got it written down here because we changed it today, on the 24th of June, Thursday the 24th of June. Now, if the Prime Minister's roadmap remains in place and he doesn't get lost, the 24th of June should be fine. So we are intending for it to happen, because I think the 21st of June is the day when supposedly the restrictions will be lifted entirely if things continue in the same vein as they currently are. So I guess that depends on all of us really, following the rules as we do. So we are intending for there to be a Year 11 prom, and I believe there's also there's an intention that the Year 13 prom will take place as well. Okay, Mrs. Schofield, I think over to you.
You're on mute, Mrs. Schofield.
I pressed one button, I didn't check the screen. Sorry, everybody. So nice to know you all there. Just a few words about people moving on from sixth form into Year 12. We've had loads of applications. We've finished all the interviews now. Everybody should have had a letter from us following up from the interviews, would have come by email. So if you haven't had that, get in touch with your tutor or contact me or Mr. Leach, but everybody should know now. We haven't yet confirmed the option blocks, which are really important for you all, just to confirm that you can do the choice of subjects you'd like to. They should be confirmed in the next few weeks. We've been a little bit sidetracked by trying to sort out all the assessment framework and so on, but this will become our top priority from about next week to sort out the option blocks. In June, we want to get everybody into sixth form for an induction day. We'll have all the Year 11s who are staying. We'll also involve people who are coming in from other schools to join us, and we're trying to work out a date for that at the moment, and that would involve a bit of team building. It would involve access to new subjects or more work in existing subjects, a chance to work together with your new tutor group and meet new tutors. So that's always a fun day. And then we will set summer work. It's important that you have a good transition going from Year 11 into Year 12. And I think especially as students won't reach quite the same pitch of revision and knowing the whole curriculum that they would do if they had to go into full exams. They'll be focused very much on particular topics that are chosen for within subjects. So it's important the summer work's done to give people a flying start in the autumn. And all of that will be confirmed more as we go over the next few weeks. Next slide, please, Mr. Ballantyne. So, of course, Year 13 face different challenges as we come through to the summer. So there'll be some reports coming out next week, which will confirm our current thinking on likely grades. Now, these are predictions, and it's very much subject to the assessments that take place, people, following the work patterns, doing all the work that we set, doing as well as we think they'll do in the mini assessments and so on. But we'll give you an indication of what we think the grades are going to look like. Now, an important question, as I know a lot of people will be wondering, is, should people be responding to university offers? So I think you shouldn't respond until their last possible day. OK, deadline for response is 10th of June. Don't make a firm choice now. It's March. All sorts of things can happen between March and June. So hold off. Your place will not go to somebody else. If you have an offer, then you will have that offer on June the 10th, but don't miss the deadline. OK, in the meantime, any virtual days you can go to, any information that's sent to you by your university, check email at least once a day, please, and just make sure you're jumping on those opportunities. Now, some people, especially as, if the roadmap continues, we could well be coming out of lockdown over the next few months. Some people are curious about deferring. And I think if you are curious about deferring, then the first thing you should do is talk to your university to see what they think about deferring. Some universities don't mind. Some universities get a little bit itchy about why didn't you say that when you applied to us? So I think sound them out gently, first of all. If you're then still thinking about it, come and talk to Mrs. Lake or me or Mr. Leach or Mr. Ballantyne. There are lots of pros and cons. From some perspectives, it's a good time to go off, maybe travel if things change enough, maybe do voluntary work or get a job, gain confidence in life outside school. Set against that, will there be many jobs at the moment? We're not very sure. How big a travel opportunity will you get at the moment? So it's not totally clear whether it's a great idea. It could be a good idea. It's very personal, but I think talk to us. That's the most important thing. Now, not everybody goes to university. Not everybody should go to university. Not everybody I know went to university. What we're doing to support people who don't want to go to university, some of those people already know what they want to do, and we're just offering support with things like writing a CV. We'll help with interview preparation. Students that haven't quite made their minds up yet, as opportunities arrive for us, I think you all know about the sixth form parents know about the opportunities document we publish. Some opportunities are very specific and we will send those to individual students. Now, it's key that people are registering with the main recruitment sites and job sites and using Unifrog, and that they take up the opportunity to have interview practice with Mrs. Lake, who's in our sixth form team, and Mrs. Desai, who's our careers advisor. There are a couple of people whose plans we don't yet know. As soon as you've got thoughts about what you'd like to do, come and talk to us, share with us, then we can help support you. We want everybody to move forwards next year, whether it's university, job, apprenticeship, doesn't matter. Whatever your choice is, we want to help make it good. Thank you, sir. I'll just check for any questions that relate to this one. So, this doesn't relate to what I've been saying, but can I answer this one? Will exam boards are just grades set by teachers? They will not. They will check whether our grades kind of match our general trend. So unfortunately, we can't just give every student an A star in every subject because that's not our normal pattern. But otherwise, the government have said no, they won't. OK, I think over to you, Mr. Ballantyne, to pick up some questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mrs. Schofield, and I can see Mr. Sizer is writing some replies to the Q&A, and we're publishing those on the Q&A. Couple more that have come through. Here's one for GCSE, I think, Mr. Sizer, for you. What happens in subjects like maths and sciences where normally the student would be taking a higher or foundation exam? How can I ensure that my child is being able to work towards one over the other?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ballantyne. So I think to that again, I'll go back to the premise really that what we want is the students to get as high grades as they possibly can and demonstrate evidence of the highest possible standards. So work will be set and the assessments will have higher grade levels in them. If somebody's aiming for, you know, 7, 8 or 9, we wouldn't set them assessments that had work that was of a level 4 in it, because that would be a bit of a waste of their time. So what we need to do is make sure that the right students are answering the right questions, and that will be for a handful of students on that threshold of what was foundation tier and higher tier. There are no tiers, they've all gone out the window because there are no exams. So it's about students taking the opportunity to demonstrate that they do have higher tier skills and knowledge, and we'll give students the opportunity to do that if they want it, if they're on that borderline. Obviously most students will know already where they are on that, so yeah, that will be built into the system, I can assure you of that. Thank you. Any others? Who's monitoring the questions?
Yeah, I think I've got one here that I can. I'm going to do a really easy one. Will students have to come to school on the 10th and 12th of August to get their results as usual? Absolutely, we'll do everything that we can to make that happen. We did last year. Not every school did, but I think again it's one of those rites of passage that we think is really important, where students come in to pick up the results. So we will do our absolute best to make sure that students come in to pick up their results and have lots of photos of them celebrating with each other. There's a question here: will the parents be informed and or updated with progress as the assessment window continues? Mr. Sizer.
Yeah, I mean, there's also another one just below that, sorry, that says, will students be told what grades they've roughly achieved throughout the process? So the second question is easier to answer. Yes, the students will definitely be told what grades they've roughly achieved, and the key word there is roughly. We're not allowed to say in your portfolio we are going to put you we're going to award you a 7 or an 8. We're not allowed to do that, but we are allowed to, for each assessment they'll get a mark, they'll see what they've got, they'll get it back, they'll see what they've got to work on. So they should all have an absolute rough idea. Now, if you can have an absolute rough anything, I'm not really sure, but a rough idea certainly of where they are and what they're doing. So shouldn't be a problem at all. The question about parents being informed and or updated with progress? Well, we're talking 10 weeks, and it's a very short time. So we'll need to think about that, because that takes time away from the work that staff are doing with students, and that's actually a lot of time. Doing reports and things is quite difficult and time consuming, and also we don't really know, because we're looking at it holistically. It's not about prediction. So in the olden days last year, we reported predictions, and therefore that was what we thought the student would get when they sit their exam. If they continue working in the same way that they are, and if they with a good wind and everything goes well, we think they'll get this grade. This is slightly different, because this is about actual attainment, what they've actually done, and it's a holistic picture overall. So it's a bit more complex than just saying, yeah, we think they're going to get that grade based on our evidence and based on our understanding of how exams work. It's a bit more complex than that, and certainly before the grade descriptors come out, I think we need to be a bit circumspect on predicting exactly what grade students are going to get, because I think that's quite tricky, if I'm honest. Year 13 is slightly different, because they are about to get reports, I believe, Mr Ballantyne.
Yeah, I've just proofread about 50 of the 90 reports today, and I have to say I'm so proud of all of our Year 13 students for the way that they've performed over lockdown. It's really just amazing to read some of the reports that and comments that your teachers have said to you. That report will have a comment from the teacher. It will also have what we'll say predicted grade. Now that predicted grade is what we expect, what we hope the student is capable of getting, that what they could get at the end of the assessment window if they meet all of their expected attitude to learning targets and complete the assessments to the best ability that they can. I had a question through, and I might pass this over to you, Mrs. Schofield, about students feeling anxious, worried over this period, and how best to cope, and how parents can also support students. With your hat as head of Year 11 last year, you've got experience of GCSE, and also head of sixth form this year. What would you say the best thing to support anxious students, worried students? Oh, sorry, you're on mute again, Mrs. Schofield.
This is the lesson that keeps on giving. I'm so sorry. The most important factor, I think, to take away from this evening is this is completely genuine. When Mr. Sizer says it, we want the students to have the best possible grades, the absolute best possible grades. And I think that's really important. And that surely takes away one of the annual stresses for most students about, oh God, I've got this exam, have I learned the right things, what's going on. We will only test people on content that's been taught. So with the various disruptions and so on, and the homeschooling and all the things we've gone through, if there's a topic in a subject that we haven't taught, that simply will not be used as part of the assessment portfolio. So people don't need to be worrying about that. I think the fact that we bear in mind we're breaking things down into small focused assessments, students really can home in on, for history, I need to revise this key topic before I take that short assessment. For science, the same thing. So I think reassurance that we want to give the best grades, and that actually these individual assessments each are worth less than one big exam at the end of the year, and we're very focused, should help. But then I think, the standard things that we would normally say, it's important to have a time to stop work. It's important that there's time to do things other than work. It's important to get exercise and to eat as well as possible and have time outside and, keep work in its place, in its perspective, have a plan for when you're going to work, have a look at the overall timetable of all the mini assessments you've got and plan in breaks, make sure you've got time planned for the bits of revision and planning breaks. And a little bit of a small number of nerves obviously are helpful. We all need a little bit of that to help us perform. But if after all of those things you find that you're unduly anxious, it's really important you talk to your tutor or talk to one of your year group team, whoever you feel relaxed talking to, or indeed that a parent contacts the school. Thank you, Mr. Ballantyne.
I've got a question here, Mr. Ballantyne. Sorry, I know I'm talking and you're on the screen, which is a bit.
I was on mute myself, so 2-1 to you, Mrs. Schofield.
Dubbing over you, like one of those old Eastern European dramas I watched in the 1970s on a Saturday morning, with some dodgy dubbing. Okay, we've got a couple of other questions which I think are interesting. Another one, possibly missed the bit we talked about earlier. Do you know what the last day at school will be for Year 11 pupils? No, but the last day, as we said before, the last day of submitting work will be the 28th of May, which is half term, and we're hoping to do a leaving day and events, an event and a rite of passage after that when restrictions are over. So a couple of other questions are, for those who've not fared well due to schooling at home, can they repeat the year at Willink or would they need to go elsewhere? I mean, this is a year 13 question, I would imagine, but my advice is you've got 10 weeks to undo any bad work you might have done during lockdown and remote learning, because there are opportunities now. It doesn't matter, in some ways it doesn't matter what you've done during remote learning. What matters is what you do now. So don't worry too much about that, but if you are concerned,
can I come in on that one, sir?
Because certainly can.
Yeah, because that was a similar question to last year when we had the results that were that came out last year, the algorithm and the ensuing fiasco, which we hope will be much better this year. The message that we said to students who are considering resitting, there is an opportunity to resit exams in the autumn as well, is that if you get the grades that allow you to progress to the next stage of your education, whether that's going from year 11 to sixth form or to college, or going from year 13 into an apprenticeship or to university, then I think you should just go with it. Experience from the past is when people resit the year, they rarely do that much better than they have when they've been at school, and they've watched their friends move off in other directions and start afresh, and it's often not the most positive or productive year. So I would always encourage students, if they've got the grades that allow them to progress to the next level, to the next stage, to do that. Let's have a look at some other questions that are coming through. Did you answer the question about the external tutors, Mr. Sizer? Because that's an interesting one. And again, that was a similar one to last year.
No, I didn't. I think external tutors, we won't use data from external tutors, because we'll use the data that we have here. If you have external tutors in maths and English and other subjects, we would expect to see the evidence of that in the work that the students have done in school. So if they've developed their writing or their arithmetic, you might see that evidence in the lessons. So that would be the benefit of an external tutor, but we can't use evidence from an external tutor, I'm afraid, because we need to be able to be sure about where it's come from.
There are some questions about grades and meeting or beating grades or falling behind grades. So one person has said, will year 13 students be able to improve on the predicted grades given in their reports? Not just year 13 students, but year 11 students as well. Absolutely. And I think there's a great opportunity this year for students to improve on predictions, because there'll be this clear path of how people are going to be assessed. So yep, we're not going to cap grades. If we say, you're looking like a 6 at GCSE or a B at A level or something, beat it, go for it. I'd love to be wrong in that way.
It's an interesting point, that one, isn't it, Mrs. Schofield? Because we were umming and ahhing in our discussions about reports as to whether we should give out predicted grades to students at this point. And I think it's important that students do know where they currently are, where they're performing, where we think they could get to, so that they have a baseline on which to improve and work over the next 10 weeks. So hopefully the reports that you get next week will give students for year 13, will give them that clue, that indication.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really important point. And then somebody has also asked if somebody has a bad day in one of the mini assessments, will their grade immediately fall? We're going to make these final grade calculations based upon the whole raft of factors. And again, you know, I think this works really well for the students. If we know that this student actually has done really well in, you know, 6 assessments and done all the right things, and they just made a fluff of something on one day, we know the students and we can take that into consideration. Just as the case if somebody has, you know, a period of illness during the assessment periods and can't do them all, we know the students. So individual problems, individual, you know, bad days, or this particular topic didn't work so well, won't necessarily have a hugely, you know, bad impact. Okay, so don't worry about individual problems.
And similarly, following on to that, we've got what about students that have worked incredibly hard throughout homeschooling, which, to be fair, is the vast majority of them. Will any of this work be taken into account for them? Absolutely. If they've done work that is of a good standard and we can include it in the portfolio, we absolutely will. We are looking to, what's the phrase, catch people being good and reward good work, whenever that was, be that in year 10 or any point in year 11. We are looking to reward good work. But obviously, the next 10 weeks are important because that's when students, in theory, are at their best, because they're leading up to their, you know, they're finishing the course. You would expect students to be better now than they were in November or they were in year 10. So the next 10 weeks are important, but we certainly are not going to ignore anything that anybody's done that's very good previously. In fact, that's very important evidence for us.
There's a question come through that says, what happens if a year 11 student doesn't obtain the grades for 6th form? We want, if students apply for 6th form, they've had their interviews, and I think we want year 11s to come to 6th form. We really, really do. And so this year we've got a new pathways entry system. So depending on the grades that you get, there's a selection of courses that's tailored for you, and we will have discussed that with your son or daughter. If the grades are not what you expected, we will have that conversation, but we will do everything we can to try and get you onto a course in 6th form that suits you. And I think following on from that, Mrs. Schofield, I wonder if it's worth just talking about why it's important to work so hard for year 11s over the next 10 weeks in order to access the curriculum at A level. Are you able to say something about that?
Yes, I mean, it's going to be a balance for everybody, but we've got 2 objectives at year 11 and year 13. A very important objective is for us to come up with the framework of assessments and help your children get their best possible grades. Another objective is to ensure that we're helping people get as far as we can through finishing and really understanding all the courses, never mind whether we assess on everything. Because whatever comes next, if you're going out, you know, coming into our 6th form or going to another college with a basket of GCSEs or going out into the world with your A levels, people will make assumptions about the level of knowledge you've got and the skills you've built up. And we think it's really important to make sure we help you have those skills so you're well prepared for moving forwards. So students in year 11 will be wanting you to be as well prepared as you can for A level so that you can hit the ground running in September and not feel worried or confused or left behind in the work, but able to really enjoy getting into your new courses.
Okay, thanks, Mrs. Schofield. I think we're almost coming up to 1:15, Mr. Sizer. The questions seem to be drying up a little bit. There's one more that says,
yeah,
if the majority of students do better in assessments than previous years, will all the students have to be moderated so grades are in the same percentage proportion to usual years?
Okay, the answer to that is no. So if you cast your minds back to a year ago, well, just under a year ago, when the A-level results came out and what was referred to as the mutant algorithm that the DFE applied, or the Ofqual, which is the Office of Qualifications, applied to the A-level results, which meant that all the grades that the teachers sent in, many of them were changed to fit in with the pattern of previous years. But of course it meant that students who deserved really high grades ended up getting lower grades based on all sorts of strange mathematical formula. That was an absolute scandal. Quite rightly, it was an absolute scandal, and that's not going to happen this year. So there is an acceptance that grades will be higher this year, because but that's right. Students are not being assessed by exams, therefore you'd expect them to be higher. So as Mrs. Schofield says, if someone does badly on a day when they're doing an assessment in an English GCSE, you know, a 10-mark question English GCSE, it doesn't really matter. If they do badly on a GCSE that they've spent 2 years studying and they wake up with really bad hay fever and do really badly, that does have a big impact. So you'd expect results to be higher, and they will be nationally. What we have been told is that our results and every school's results will be checked to make sure that they are not wildly different from what we typically get and what we might expect to get. And if that is the case, then we will be potentially penalised and certainly will be audited, and we don't really want that. So we're going to be fair and honest, and we're going to be transparent about it. We're going to give the students the grades that they deserve, not high grades just because we can. They have to provide the evidence to support that. Many of them already have provided evidence. Most of them will go on and give us evidence now. We want them to do well, and the results will be higher accordingly. Is that a bad thing? No, I think it's probably a good thing. I think this group of students have, well, I probably shouldn't say this in a live event, they've been royally screwed over by COVID, and they've been affected in very many ways badly by a disease which is not really going to affect them particularly. And actually, I think society owes them some payback, and the opportunity to do as well in their exams as they possibly can is good payback. And we certainly intend for the students to get what they deserve. That's what we want. We want them to be able to go on and do their A-level courses, and we want them to go on and do their university courses that they want to do. And the way they do that is by doing as well as they possibly can. We don't think we've got any more questions coming in. Do we think you've got a last few moments to put in a question if you think, oh, I have got a question that hasn't been answered yet? But otherwise, we've kind of reached that point of the evening where we can all go home, hopefully watch Liverpool get knocked out of the Champions League, and have a good night's sleep as a consequence. I don't think anybody needs to worry. Okay, Roosevelt said, I've got a map of 1914 of Europe, 1914, where the First World War started, so I should have a historical ending, really. Franklin Roosevelt, who was the president of America in 1933, came in when it was elected at the start of the Depression, said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And I genuinely think that's the case this time. I think our students will be taught well, they will be prepared for assessments really well, and they will do really well. And you really shouldn't worry at all. Thank you very much. We look forward to working with your sons and daughters over the next 10 weeks and seeing them do really well this summer. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mr. Sizer. Thanks, Mrs. Schofield. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll put this up on the website over the next couple of days if you want to watch it again, or if you missed the first bit of it. Good night.